Okay, hi everyone. We're back again today with the lovely Christine Morgan from Sydney, Australia. And Christine is a very wonderful medium, a lovely lady. I've been fortunate enough to meet you in the past in Holland. And you are the only accredited SNU, CSNU medium in Australia. You have your own school for mediumship and intuitive arts. You're a tutor at the Arthur Findlay College, a third generation British medium, but residing in Australia. That's correct, right?
It is, but I'm not the only accredited CSNU medium in Australia. I'm the only accredited medium to go through the teacher training at
Oh,
Arthur.
sorry. Yes, the teacher training. That was it.
A few other CSNU mediums here, yes.
Yes. But you
But I'm not
are
the only...
accredited teacher.
Yes, for
Yes.
the college,
Yes.
yes, definitely.
Yes, and so when we're going to have a few parts of the interview with you, three separate interviews. But first, as I mentioned, you are a third generation medium, so there must have been stories that you've heard through the grapevine, through the family, of the great masters of the past, but also wonderful mediumship of our pioneers. And because the generation, yes.
Yeah, my grandfather on my mum's side was very interested in spiritualism. So was my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that my grandmother frequented spiritualist churches, and my grandfather dabbled with it. And then I know he was working with mediumship, and he was in the Navy.
Oh.
So he used to actually give sessions on board for all the sailors and through the war and things like that. So
Yeah.
in those days, when you had all the pioneers and all the old wonderful greats that we know about and all those stories, it was very much a living reality. It was very much something that was quite normal for people to visit spiritualist churches in war days and things like that, more so than even today. So my grandparents dabbled with it for a little while, and I say the word dabbled because my grandmother, my grandfather's wife, was a very natural medium, and she frequented some spiritualist churches, but she also read the tea leaves and pyromancy, used to read the flames in the fires, and people would come to her from many different places to her home for readings. And then my grandfather went to sea, and he had a very, what I believe, because I never met him, he died the year before I was born, but I have a wonderful story about that. And he actually did readings for people on board the ship, and he had a very natural ability with the spirit world, though he never sort of went through any circle training or anything. It was very natural, I believe, which then passed down to my mother and her sisters. And then my mother married my father, my biological father, who was a medium in England.
Yeah.
So I had it on both sides of the family. And I believe it was in his family with his grandmother as well before that. So it's a bit of a mix of two families.
That is quite interesting. You've got it from both sides. And do you remember stories, a certain story that was told to you of something that happened?
Well, my dad, who's now in the spirit world himself, used to talk about old names that I've only read about, like Bertha Harris, May
Oh,
Pickering,
wow. Yes.
Gordon. He talked about all those people being very prominent when he was training. He did a lot of, he was training a little bit, he trained a little bit with Glenn Edwards.
Yes.
He was friends with Glenn Edwards at the beginning of his life, and then they parted ways. So him and Glenn started their education and training together. And there was a lot of stories about old greats, but being able to go and see some of these people at a natural local church, like, you know, this is when all the pioneers and that they did all the regular normal churches that some people won't even visit today, sadly. And they went and saw great people, like, and I remember my dad telling me a particular story about Albert Best. And he knew Albert, and he was going along with some friends of his to watch a church service, and they happened to come in early, and Albert was sitting in the church itself before they'd opened the doors to the public, and my dad and his friend were known to the president of the church. So they went in, and Albert was sitting in an altered state, and they both witnessed independent voice. in the church before the service with Albert,
Wow.
which Albert, we know, didn't do a lot of physical mediumship, but he was interested. And so it was something quite mind-blowing at that time for two young men who were just learning about mediumship. And they went and he sat and told them old stories and told a lot of his experiences. But before it happened, he'd been sitting in, went into a bit of an altered state, and they both heard the independent voice speak to them. I don't remember what was said, but I know there was names given, absolute excellent names. And they were both mind blown, obviously, because they were sitting in the pews of this lovely old spiritualist church. And it was a
Yes.
tiny old place, and it just whoop came to them, which we would love to hear more
Yeah.
frequently. And
And
to
just,
Albert, yeah, Albert, it was very natural and he was a very unassuming man, apparently. And he just said, oh, yes, that they're here. That's just friends. And he fell into a little bit of an altered state, and I believe he spoke in the altered state to them. I don't recall what was said, but it was just in those days, those things were very natural, right? People are striving to achieve that these days, but in those things, some of those things were very natural and may have been infrequent, but I know from stories that were told to me with the people around my father as well, when he was interested and talking about these people, they witnessed it very naturally more than we do today. And I think that's sad because some of that's died away, hasn't it?
yeah. And it would be interesting because I'm listening to you speak about it, and the lights would have been on, assuming the lights would have been on in the church.
All the
So
lights were on and the voice, yeah.
yeah, so that's quite interesting because now we have such a, yeah, sorry?
Three witnesses. So,
Yeah,
it wasn't somebody telling a story. There was three actually independent witnesses, which was rather wonderful.
that is wonderful. And, and it kind of brings you back to the essence that we, these days, I find that there's so much structure and so many rules and saying we can't do this or you can't do that. When, these days, think of somebody just sitting there in full light who's not technically a physical medium and just has independent voice. And that is just a reminder of the power of spirit because it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. It was one of those things, and I think it was very unexpected and very unusual. And unfortunately, everybody's passed now who witnessed that. But it was a story that was told to me, and I went, oh, okay. And then it came to me from two other independent people because I said, I've got to find out about it. I didn't think he was physical medium, but he was very well known for the altered state work in a very natural, unassuming way.
Yeah.
So, obviously it was a spontaneous experience, but it actually occurred. But an experience that's treasured. So stories like that. And my dad would talk about Bertha Harris and May Pickering, who he sat in a circle with, very old, lovely mediums who were well known in their day for their dedication, but also, tough, hard-working people that did the training the hard way, and they didn't suffer any nonsense. There was none of this rubbish nonsense. It was, this is how it works. This is what we're doing with the spirit. And it was about, I remember my dad saying, it was also about going to the spirit world and saying, well, what use can I be? How do you want to work with me? It wasn't about the demand of what I want. I need this evidence. I need this. I need that. It was about the naturalness of going and sitting in the power and letting the power move you and allowing the spirit world to have a voice. It wasn't about what we needed. And I think sometimes today we've structured too much, where especially today in the last 5 years as well, like everybody's like manic. I need this, I want this, I need this. And so I think those days, even though times have changed and we're in a different era, I think those days are treasured. I think they're very precious because it was more of a natural event with the spirit world. It was more of a natural union.
And I think perhaps even more respectful.
Yeah, I would agree. And less demand.
Yeah, and more of a really literally communion of spirits rather than give me this, I want to be on platform, and because that's what you have quite a lot.
Yeah, definitely. But wonderful stories like that, and being able to see some of our great people in a church service. And one of the things that was wonderful, as they talk so much about inspirational address
Yes.
and a one inspired philosophy. And in those days, they used to have the speaker and the medium working separately.
Yeah.
You know, you got to see great people and hear great speakers. So I was sort of brought up, when I decided to research and have a look into spiritualism myself, with these stories of things that would happen. So my dad was quite old-fashioned and set in his ways. God bless him. But he was a damn good medium when he was here. And I witnessed him work, and it wasn't something I ever wanted to do. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. I was very reluctant. But it was a very natural process. And I understand some things better now that he taught me than when I did when I was getting taught. When he was sharing with me many, many years ago,
Yeah.
I appreciate what he was trying to tell me now, because I think I have a maturity in my mediumship to understand more.
Now that is excellent. So we'll keep that part because that's a right natural intro for the second part of our interview about Christine the medium. So I'll stop recording this, and then we'll have the viewers follow part 2, Christine the medium. This was part 1, Christine, third generation medium with great stories from the past. Thank you, Christine.